Are we all on now?
Good morning.
Good morning. How is everybody today?
Good.
Okay, so everybody can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then we will see what we can't do to make this work. So good morning, Julia and
Good
Michael, and our
Good morning.
guest, Emily Hladik. How are you?
Yeah. If you just ignore that H and say Hladik, it is much easier to decipher.
Perfect. That's a good thing. Okay, so there we are. Yay. We were a little late getting started because I'm live from my aunt's basement in Ohio, so not anywhere around. So sorry for delays or anything like that. But we wanted to have Emily on this morning, and I'm going to let you kind of give your because your background is so interesting. So let's start with your background and then let's go with what we're going to talk about today. But let's talk about your background first.
Sure. I married my Marine. It'll be 25 years ago this September. So we have 3 children. Our oldest is 23, graduated college in 2020, successful in his first adult job, adulting pretty well, but he really loves work a lot. So he's doing great. He was never homeschooled. By the time he graduated high school, he went to 9 different schools. So I was the only constant in his education. So when we moved, I was the one that knew what he knew and what he didn't know. So, and different states had different standards. So, like in one state, it wasn't required to memorize your math facts in 3rd grade. Well, in my world, you have to memorize your math facts in 3rd grade. So he did some homeschool stuff during the summer. He would learn what I wanted him to know, and then school would be more of a review. But he did great. Schools were easy and let me pick his own classes. Like I'd make an appointment with the principal, take a tour, listen in on the teachers that taught his grade. And I would always say, I think he'd work really well with this instructor or with this teacher. And yep, great, no problem. See you in a couple weeks whenever you move and are ready to start. So that's kind of how I thought it went as a military family. His little sister came along 7 years later. And man, I was ready for her to go to school. I was one of those countdown moms, like, oh, it'll be great. She's going to love school. I'll get the house clean. And her experience was completely different. It was pretty evident in the first couple of weeks that it wasn't going to be the same. I talked to the principal about changing teachers because they hadn't let me choose. They actually laughed at me when I said, I really think Anna would do well in this class. And they said, oh, that's so funny. Parents don't actually get to choose their parents' teachers. It was an elementary school in Northern Virginia that had 900 children. Within the first couple of weeks, her little light just started to dim. And then about 5 or 6 weeks it wasn't even 5 or 6 weeks, probably 3 weeks in, she dropped a bomb on us at dinner. She called herself stupid. So I did marry Marine. I think I have worse vocab than he does, but we never, ever called any of our children stupid. That was an S word that was completely unheard of. So I knew there was a problem. I went to observe the school, and it was the teacher that was the problem. So the next day, she didn't go back to school. The school was pretty upset. They said, well, in Virginia, you have to be registered, tried to bully me. And I didn't have a whole lot of information, but I said, well, you're not going to change her out of that class, and we're not coming back to that class. We found this great Christian day school that she got to finish her kindergarten year. It was a Sunday school teacher. She taught herself how to read that year. She just absolutely thrived in this little day school, but they only went to kindergarten. So then I took her back to that elementary school. The principal was so happy to let me choose her teacher. It was a brand new teacher. And I thought, oh, she just graduated. Like, I can totally roll her. So I volunteered like 3 or 4 days a week, reading books, making crafts, being a helper in the classroom. But by this time, I already had our third. She was maybe 6 months old at the time. So that was getting complicated. And I was just always in the pickup drop-off line or always at the school. And it wore me out that year. And I thought, there has got to be a better way. So homeschool was my last possible choice. And so by 2nd grade, I said, I'm not doing that mess anymore. It was an exhausting year. We're just going to homeschool. and we've never looked back. It has been absolutely wonderful. The girls and I were free to set our own schedules, and it was needed to get my son through high school. Just doing his activities, it was nice that if we had a late night, it didn't really matter. We just have a late start the next morning. Um, so we joined classical conversations a little bit later, and that really was perfect for our family. It gave us enough of a classroom and like children to invite to birthday parties, um, and it had some structure. But then, hey, I'm sorry, we're going to skip that this week. You can tailor it to yes, we're going to do this, or no, we're not going to do that, and it's fantastic. And you really have a lot of support with other moms. And homeschoolers can be really hard to find in rural areas. We're in Northwest Oklahoma. So it is kind of hard to find other people. I think my favorite part of homeschooling has been high school years. The elementary years was lots of cut and paste, crafting, and that is not me at all. I loved the middle school, high school years. So my middle daughter is graduating. It's her senior year. She has been in VOTEC this year and also taking concurrent enrollment classes at the junior college and finishing up some English and math for me. This next upcoming academic year, she'll just finish her cosmetology degree license, and she'll take classes out at the college for to finish up her general high school credits. So that has been super great for her. And my youngest is in 8th grade. Challenge B is what CC calls it, and she's just doing great. So I know how limited my time is with her. But that's kind of a homeschool background. I love hearing people's homeschool testimonies because most all of them start with, I never thought in a million years I would homeschool, but I wouldn't trade it. And just last night, my husband works for the state, and he got a new position, and he's working more with the public. And he said, thank you so much for homeschooling our girls. I asked him, I said, do you mind, can I homeschool the girls? And he said, just as long as your homeschool doesn't become my night school. So he's been supportive of it.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I'm so grateful for his commitment to support our family, why the girls and I do this. And it looks, our days sometimes look really strange. But, we call him, he's the administration. He pays all our bills, makes sure that we are well prepared. I'm a teacher by trade, so it really is just my heart, but it's been really exciting and it's been great. And he really is appreciative of all the time and effort it has taken.
That is so awesome because, it's so funny the number of people who we talked to who homeschool, including myself, who had kind of a similar, experience, a kid who just, was not going to be the square peg in the square hole, it just wasn't going to happen. Did you find, because it seems to me just from, the research that I did when we were doing homeschool, military families kind of homeschooling really works for them because like you said, you moved around a lot.
Right.
So it just,
it definitely frees us up. And I think that it's a continuity that is difficult to come by otherwise. My son, he actually had to transfer schools because academically the school that our district was not adequate. So I said, well, we can find you another school or you can be homeschooled because right now you just have a gym membership. Because like he had been at school for several weeks and hadn't had a single geometry class. They didn't have a tutor. The teacher was gone. There wasn't a tutor. So they just dismissed him to the cafeteria. Like, well, that's not going to work. But then he got transferred to a fantastic public school and that worked really well. So it can be done because we were military and he did transfer. But my son was just different. And my girls, the thing that so attracted me to homeschool was the women that they would come out of school were not the characteristics that I was looking for. My middle daughter is still pretty quiet, very gentle. We've had to practice to toughen her up. I remember when she was little and I thought this seems to be contrary to what I'm training her to be a tougher cookie than what she naturally is. And I just thought that's not what I want to do actually. So it was just a whole different ballgame with my girls. And so it can be done, but it's harder. But I think homeschool is solid to give your children continuity, and they just know what school is, and it's the same in any place that they are.
Right. That's, I think that's a lot of the reason why, a lot of people homeschool is just the continuity. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
people that are, come into homeschooling, kind of do that. So you as a military mom and wife have traveled a lot anyway, because that's kind
Yeah.
of been your MO. But I want you to explain the grand tour. And it's funny because like I said, I'm here at my aunt's house in Ohio, and my sister and I are together. And I told her, what we were going to be talking about on our podcast this morning, and she said the grand tour. What do you? And I
So
started trying to explain it to her, but I don't think people really, unless you've read a Jane Austen book, you know, I don't think you really know what it is.
Right. So it's a pretty it's a pretty British continental European idea. I think I think I don't know, maybe Southerners still do it or like to do it. I don't know why, but when I was in high school, I always, my mom was an English teacher. You know what? That I think I just nailed it down on why this happened to us. She uh, loved British literature, so that's probably why. So I was in high school, and my sister is 3 years older, so it was probably just after my freshman year, maybe sometime around her senior year. We went on a student trip, and my mom had gone to Europe as well. Um, she was actually in Eastern Europe while she was in high school when the Iron Curtain fell, and that was a hugely
Oh,
impactful
wow.
thing for her. And like, and the other fact is, the other place that it could have started, like we ate dinner every night together. My grandmother would cook for us, and my mom and sister and I ate dinner every night together. And we'd have great discussions, or not great discussions, but discussions nonetheless. So we had to talk at the table. So dinner is a hugely important thing in our family. And so we would talk about things. And she was naturally interested in politics. And I think as a child, if that happens to you and Soviet soldiers come on your bus to check your passports, that probably is going to make you more interested in politics.
Right.
So when we were in high school, she wanted us to go, and she was a single mom, and so she wasn't going to take off to Europe just with us, but the school that she worked at, our local high school, had like a student trip. So it was like one flat fee, airfare included. I think it was 2 weeks in Europe, and you're going to start in London and you're going to end in Italy. That's the grand tour. So that's what we did. That trip looked a lot different than what the historic grand tour is. I looked up a little bit of the history. The Grand Tour was actually written about for the first time in the 17th century by a priest who was visiting Rome. And he wrote about it in a guidebook called The Voyage of Italy. So mostly Englishmen would send their sons, wealthy Englishmen would send their sons with a tutor to travel. So obviously they'd launch from England, end up in France first, and they would move slowly through the continent and usually end up in Italy, sometimes in Greece, seeing all the great sites, seeing classical Roman ruins, looking at fantastic art. I think the Renaissance was only like 100 to 200 years old at this time, between the 17th and 18th century. So looking at fantastic art, reading Greek and Latin, all the things that they had been studying, seeing places that they had only read about. And this tutor would go through with them, and they'd experience lots of things. There wasn't a set destination, but they mainly stuck to the capitals and other famous places. It lasted you at least a year, but sometimes even 2 years, which sounds
Oh, wow.
fantastic to me. Um, but it was really a transitional time where these young people had their first taste of independence away from their families. They had a chance to experience society and culture that was not their own, and have some really great stories to last them. And I think for all of those reasons, that's why I think my mom took me to Europe, and that's why I've insisted on taking my children with us to Europe and to do this grand tour type thing. So my son, we found like the summer before your junior year is your last pretty quiet summer, actually. So I usually pick that summer to go, and I was nervous. we had done some traveling to Europe, but so I had the student European trip where you're on and off a bus. They drive by Big Ben, you know, they
Yeah.
drive by the Eiffel Tower and you snap a picture. And that was fantastic because it thrilled me to bits. If somebody today gave me a student tour, I would take it. I would be out of here and I would do it. But then we went to Greece. We took my son to Greece. My mother actually had brain cancer, and we had a
Oh,
little window, and she had always wanted to see Greece. And so for her physical condition and the fact that my son was, gosh, he was maybe 9, no, maybe he was 7, we decided to do a cruise because you just unpack once and then
yeah.
you get on and off and see the sights, and that was fantastic. I absolutely love that, and that gave me a little bit of courage because you know, we navigated from the airport to the cruise port and we didn't fall off the face of the earth. So even though
Yeah.
we didn't speak Italian, that was encouraging. So my son was in high school in his turn, and I booked a tour through Rick Steves' tour. I watched his show on PBS, and I still will watch it when it comes on because it's just fantastic. His tour, his European tours were great. So I booked a tour. It started in France and ended in Rome. And I thought that's almost what I want. So we booked an earlier flight and did London on our own. We spent probably 3 nights and 4 days in London, and then we took the train to Paris, and that was fantastic. The Eurostar. And we did that, and we found our hotel, and we met up with our tour group, and that gave me a little bit of encouragement that hey, we were able to do London, and they all spoke English, and that was fine. And we did the whole tour group, and that was the best. So if that's what I would highly recommend is doing a tour like that if it's your first time, because on that tour it has a little bit of built-in. Your tour guide teaches you how to use transits in each city. They teach you how to get around and any little nugget of information like how to make a reservation or when to ask for a cab or when you could just hail a cab yourself. Those things are just amazing. So that gave me a crash course in traveling in a lot of different countries. So after that, I was pretty confident. I thought, yeah, we can do this. I have been studying French for so many years, and I just recently downloaded another app and it did a placement test and it said, you're a beginner. So I can't crack this language, but I love it. I keep trying to study French, and it's just not natural. And my brain just doesn't work that way, but I'm not giving up. But I thought, hey, we know French. Let's go to Northern France for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And my husband was like, are you serious? So we decided to do it, and our family of 5 went, and we planned out, it was pretty much a Northern France tour, and for a couple of days doing maybe like a week touring D-Day and other places in Northern France. And then we spent just a little over a week in Paris, and we rented an apartment. And that gave me all sorts of courage. I
Wow.
can't even tell you. It was fantastic. And to watch my kids, and their brother was older, he was in college, so he would get them up in the morning and run them down to the boulangerie around the corner and get breakfast and then come back up to the apartment while we were getting ready. I mean, it was just fantastic. They really, by the end of it, and I was real mindful to teach them, even I think my youngest, she was 9 at the time. I taught her how to read the signs in the metro. Heaven forbid that she got separated. She knew that the metro line, green Galini go home, is the little mnemonic thing that I taught her. So she would know which line she needed to get on to get back to her apartment and what stop we would be at. So she stuck to me like glue. But it was fantastic. And the confidence that that gave them, because they were taking French lessons as well, that they could read signs, that they could communicate with people, they could order in French. It was murderous. We didn't sound like a local, but they were so gracious. It was fantastic. So then the last time we went was after COVID. Just a second, I'm going to get a drink. Was my middle daughter's high school trip, and I really wanted to take her on the grand tour, but I wasn't going to get a COVID shot to do it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't for sure wasn't going to inject her with something. So I was super disappointed about it. But then England opened up and said that they weren't requiring any vaccinations. And I thought, that's where we're going. We're going to do a grand tour of England. And that's what we did.
Okay.
And it was fantastic. So it was great. Her favorite place in the world happened to be someplace that I just randomly thought of, like, hey, we're going to be jet lagged. So we could spend like an hour here outside getting some sunshine and walking around. And it turns out that, it just left me in Oxford. There's a meadow. Oh, and it's her favorite place in the world, Christchurch Meadow. Oh, that's what it was,
Okay.
Christchurch Meadow. And it's absolutely fantastic. We walked in, there were these young boys playing cricket, almost like a t-ball game in the United States, but they and all their parents were out playing cricket. There were these gorgeous cows. Christchurch just looks like a castle.
Yeah.
Flowers, gardens, a little river that went through, and I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And we just started in Oxford and just toured all of England. And we can get into the more details of that later. But I think the thing is, no matter which way you do it, there's ultra cheap, and then there's much more expensive. I have a lot of help with a tour guide, and then we're going to do it completely on our own. There's so many different ways that you can do a tour. I just encourage you to research and figure out which way is going to be the best way for you, and then just do it with your children. They're some of my happiest memories. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think about some place that we've been, or my kids will be reading something. My daughter just read Henry V. So the Battle of Agincourt means something to her because she's been to northern France and she understands what the geopolitics were, what it still looks like today. And she just has that in her mind. That is a precious thing to me, and it makes Shakespeare come alive to her. When we were in London, I said, well, we can do this, this, or this. And she picked something. And one of the options was the Globe Theater. She was like, no, I don't really think I want to go see that. And last summer, we were talking about what she was going to be studying this year. And I said, well, you have about 5 Shakespeare's plays that you're going to get through. And she said, oh, I wish that we would have gone to see the Globe. And I said, hey, next time you're in London, that's the first place you should go, is the Globe.
Yes.
It's interesting that you say that, because my daughter, I haven't been, my 2 daughters were, they came from Zambia. They were born in Zambia. And so when I went over to pick them up from Africa, we just barely got a little bit of England in, and I have not been back, but my daughter Betty wanted to, Hillsdale College has a great program for travel for juniors and seniors. And so when she was a senior, she actually went to Europe with Hillsdale. And they did it. Yeah, it was a literature class. And so they had to read Jane Austen. They had to read Shakespeare. They had to read Mallory, Melvin. I mean, they had to read a number of different, British authors to be able to go. And one of the things that they did do was go to the Globe Theater. And she was like, you stand up the whole time.
Yes. Yes.
Know this stuff. I've not been there. It was super, super interesting. But she did say this, because she's not I'm a huge Jane Austen fan. She isn't as big of a Jane Austen fan, but I will tell you, when she went to Bath, because that's mentioned several times in Jane Austen novels, and the one she had to read, and that made that come alive for her too. Mm-hmm. And so we were finally kind of on the same wavelength for a little bit with Jane Austen. And I was like, and you went to Bath. It was so it's like
mother-daughter bonding over Jane Austen warms my heart. Like, I can't tell you how exciting that is. Yes. Yeah, it really is. And I think that it puts all of these, like, classical education is how I chose to homeschool them, but it puts all of these disconnected things, and travel can bring them all together. And it's just, it's just an amazing, wonderful gift. I really, really love politics, and only my son loves politics and history almost as much as I do. But my girls, frankly, just aren't that interested. Yeah. But when we're traveling and something happens and it's not the way that they think it should be, then they're open and have such a great discussion. Like walking around the Arc de Triomphe, there's soldiers with like M16 type rifles. I'm like, what is that? Why is that okay? Because they would never see military people carrying weapons like that. But and we had a great discussion about how the people are armed in the United States, but they're not armed in Europe.
Right.
And that means only the police or only the military can be called in to carry weapons around things. So it was just things that they don't think of because it's normal for them. They get thrown in these situations, and then they are curious and they ask more questions. I think my favorite thing was,
no, go ahead.
One of my favorite things was I've been to London probably 3, maybe 4 times, and I'd never gotten to see the House of Commons. And my daughter and I think, we got food poisoning. We ate something. I won't say where it was, but it was very disappointing. We were both sick as dogs. And I woke up feeling much better. And my daughter did not wake up feeling fantastic. And I said, okay, look, why don't you just sleep? I'll catch up on going through my photos. I'll get some things planned out. We have to figure out some things. So you just sleep, and then we'll see how you feel. So she woke up a little afternoon and she said, hey, I think I feel pretty good. And I said, well, great, let's just go walk around. So we went and just walked around, and we happened to walk up to the Westminster Palace where the House of Parliament is, and there was not a line for anything. There was nobody there. So we just walked into it, and she said, did you want to see the House of Commons or the House of Lords? And I said, yes. And so she said, here. And so we got to see both, which never happens. And actually there was a homeschool protest that was going on. There was a regulation bill before the House of Lords. And so the homeschoolers were out protesting because they didn't want to be regulated. And I just thought, God, you are so amazing. And we stood in this long line with homeschoolers, and homeschoolers in England look just like homeschoolers in the United States. But it was so cool. And I thought, just when you wake up sick and you think, oh, all these hours are going to be wasted, and God just changed the schedule, and we just walked right into this place and got to do more than what we ever thought of. And unfortunately, there was one protester that was very hot, and she was arrested and escorted out. And it was absolutely mind-blowing to see. But my daughter and I were having, we just stopped for a little snack, something easy and a tea, and all of a sudden we see this woman being drugged out by the police. It was fantastic.
Homeschooler?
A homeschool. She had lost her mind about something, and it was.
Don't mess with us homeschoolers.
But they're just as passionate as we are. It was so fantastic.
Yeah.
And that was my girl that doesn't like government.
I want to ask you a question, because this to me is the most important question. And so I can't wait to hear your answer to this. So I have not heard you since this entire time describing sitting down and taking out a pencil and doing this or that or the other thing on it, like a worksheet, or you haven't, to me, from my perspective as another, homeschooler and a public school teacher and everything else, we spend more time doing nonsense.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tell people, and Julie and Michael know this, because this is like my mantra, you can't make homeschool look like public school. That's not what this is about. It's not about, because if they were doing it right in public school, we would have all of these, Mensa people running the world. We're obviously not doing that. So We're not going to reproduce a crappy model in our own homes. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that, that people were educated for years was through travel. That's how they were done, was through travel. So explain just a little bit about why you like this grand tour and what it does for children. You touched on it a little bit, but kind of a little bit more, elaborate just a little bit more about why this is important. And you don't have to be a millionaire to do this. It isn't that. Right. It's not about that.
Right. And I would love to talk about the practicality part of it as well. And boy, I commit some serious pen and paper. I do spreadsheets now, actually, to keep us on task and situated with tickets, travel, itinerary. Like you got to homeschool the heck out of this travel thing. It doesn't just appear. But travel is so important to me because studying Latin in Northwest Oklahoma, we have a fantastic homeschool dad who has dedicated years of his life to teach these children Latin. And
Wow.
a lot of people will say, why they're never going to use it. I can't tell you how much it thrills me to see my son in Rome at the Vatican reading Latin inscriptions. He did have Latin in Northern Virginia. In his public school. And then my girls, my daughter, were in all of these fantastic places in Oxford. There's just Latin everywhere, Latin inscriptions in all of the cathedrals. And just watching her read and pick apart the things that she knows, like to actually use it is just such a gift, and it connects her to a whole different level of humanity. The other thing that I really like, and I probably am going to offend some people, but the use of alcohol in Europe is completely different than the use of alcohol, or the use of anything. Americans are gluttonous. We overuse everything, sugar, caffeine, I don't care what it is. We abuse everything. So for them to see alcohol used in a place where, they sell wine at like road stops. So you have a glass of wine with your lunch, and then you get back in the car and keep driving at the auto grill.
Yeah.
My son was like, this is crazy. And they have breathalyzers on a lot of like tour groups to make sure your bus driver is not intoxicated. But it's different. So I think it's like 15 or 16-year-olds can have alcohol in like at a restaurant if their parents are there. So they train their children how to use alcohol.
Right.
My policy is, an appropriate use of alcohol is what I teach. And to some people, no alcohol is appropriate because of whatever genetic predisposition they have.
Right.
But it's different because you can't find that. And I remember we were in Rome, and they said that the American University in Rome, the students in their binge drinking had caused this huge problem, and other like Roman children were starting to use alcohol in a binge manner, and how shocking it was because they had never seen that before. I'm not saying there's not alcoholics in Europe, because there are, but it's just different. So I really appreciate that. My kids, dinner, I told you at the beginning that dinner has been important to us. We eat dinner every night together as a family. Occasionally, like if I was teaching night class, I figured out that my husband let them eat in front of the television, and they called it "Eat Like Americans." So, like, it's like
That's
a treat.
hilarious, actually.
Yeah, if we order pizza, then sometimes we can eat like Americans, and we'll go watch TV, like a football game or a movie or something. But otherwise, we're in the dining room eating like humans should eat. And so when we're in Europe and dinner takes 2.5 hours, it is a fantastic time. Having those fantastic conversations with my kids, and the fact that they can sit for 2.5 hours over dinner and talk to just me or to talk to other people, that is incredible. And that is, I think a lot of people always ask, how do you socialize your girls if they're homeschooled? And a much wiser woman than me said, homeschooling isn't to socialize. You socialize animals, but you civilize people. And I think that is huge. And for a child to be able to sit and have a civilized conversation and eat the food that is presented in front of them, and eat with the proper utensil, it's just an amazing gift to give.
Say that one more time, because I like that. I liked that so much.
We don't socialize children. You socialize animals. You civilize children.
I love that.
I love that.
That just makes me happy hearing you say that.
Yes. But that's not the goal of the world, and that's not the goal of most Americans, and it's evident.
Right.
Absolutely.
Jenny, that's the next theme.
Yeah, no kidding. No, I mean, it's great. I think that's phenomenal, because that's another thing that makes me so angry about people who, like to make homeschooling like a pejorative. It's like homeschoolers, and I'm like, you're missing the entire concept. And they'll use as part of this, how do you socialize your kids? Well, number one, that doesn't that doesn't mean anything. I mean, that whole term, I think the only reason why they even used it in the first place was to have a term to latch onto to
Yeah.
pejorativize, the word homeschool. Well, ye people and your kids are not,
Besides,
socialized. Well,
besides the fact that my homeschool friends, they usually have extremely well behaved children. It's like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. And I
How
think
does
that's
yeah,
the other thing. There's a lot of
every time we
parents
would
who
take
wouldn't.
go ahead.
There's a lot of parents who wouldn't dream of spending 2 solid weeks, sometimes sharing a bed with their child. And I, like, when my son and I went, I remember we walked into one hotel in Rome and we were exhausted and there was only one kind of tiny bed and we both were so tired by that time. We are like, oh, well. But there's a lot of parents who wouldn't want to spend that time with their children. And I think homeschoolers have already figured out we can spend a lot of time together and we have a really good time. That's something else my husband said. The girls and I had gotten back from visiting their brother in Mississippi, and he said, oh my gosh, y'all have been in a car for 12 hours together, and then you went to go take a walk for an hour together. It's a different lifestyle, and it's really hard to complain. But when you don't see your child for 8 to 10 hours a day,
Right.
it's really hard to have that relationship and to be able to work that closely together.
Well, and parents aren't going to take the time. I mean, parents that are just sending their kids away, why do they care how they act? I mean, they're not around them. Whereas if you know you're going to be around your child for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days, you're going to want them to rise to the occasion and behave in a certain manner. And I don't think it's something that parents think through. It's just the way people are. So.
Yeah, well, and for me, one thing that I love more than anything with my boys that are homeschooled is anytime that I'm a very handy person, mechanically inclined.
Yes, you
Everything
are.
I do, they're right there with me, and I'm literally just telling them, to perform the action that I would normally do. So whether I'm fixing drywall or working on the car or fixing the lawnmower or whatever it is, they are the ones that are actively doing that, and they're just getting that very firsthand knowledge directly from me that is so easy just to pass on, and that's what I enjoy more than anything is I have so much more interaction time with all those kids, and I can make sure to pass on what I know to them.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing like traveling with my kids. Teaching them how to use the metro and how to use when we were in Paris for a week, we just bought a pass, so you boop your pass and go through the toll booth thing. The kids also know it's a pretty safe place to go, so you're not going to get murdered, but they are going to take your phone, so you can't hold your phone like this. You have to hold it like an orange, so they don't just rip it out of your hand. And that was upsetting to them. Like they had never really thought that someone would just come by and steal something from them. But they had to learn, be aware of your surroundings. Right. They don't necessarily have to be aware of their surroundings when they go about their day here in Northwest Oklahoma, but you better be aware of your surrounding in big cities. They have confidence to be able to push themselves onto a full train car. And, there's room for me too. And they know how to defend their space. And those are things that are skills that I think, especially for the girls going off to college, traveling on their own, those are hugely important skills. Do you know how the parking works downtown? Do you know how to get yourself around on transit? Those are life skills, and it's best that they learn them with you. I do want to talk about the practical part of it, because I could just sit and talk and dream and tell about vacations because that's wonderful. But somebody asked, that's great that you're taking your kids to see France for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, but how do you just even afford that? And I said, well, we homeschool, so I'm not spending $8,000 to $10,000 per child on private school. So I much rather spend that on travel. So we don't do that every year. But how do people pay for private school? I think is the same way that you would pay for this trip. People have to work. Grandparents can contribute. This is a long-term effort that you can think about and plan for and commit money to. So it's an investment, just like it's an investment for these parents to send their children to private school and pay these tens of thousands of dollars. I think of it like that. So that's how it helps me kind of justify the cost. Just real quick to think about where you're spending your money when you travel. If you are I'm just trying to sketch out how this would be possible. I usually spend around $300 a night for a hotel. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more. If you're in a city like London or Paris, you're going to spend much more, probably closer to $400 a night. I recommend you paying more for your hotel to be in the city center or in the old town and in a safe place, because otherwise you're going to be spending money on, hey, I got this really great deal and it's only 10 minutes out of town, but that 10-minute out of town they have traffic too. So you're going to be spending all your time commuting. So spend your money on a safe place to stay, but also someplace that's centrally located that you can get around and it's like your base. We have rented an apartment in Paris and that was fantastic. It worked out really great through VRBO. I was absolutely terrified. The train stopped about 20 minutes from Paris. And I thought, oh my gosh, what happens if this apartment is in a terrible neighborhood and I was all wrong? And it, like, dread washed over me then. Well, we're 20 minutes out. It's too late to be hesitant about it.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be beautiful. But if you're not quite that bold, look for hotels. Some of them have family rooms, but the hotels are going to be for double occupancy. But then if not, look for something with a family room. Airfare for us, it's much cheaper now than it was. The most expensive I've ever paid for a plane ticket is $1,800 the ticket. And that was quite some time ago. But most recently, our most recent tickets I got for just under $1,000 with taxes included. You're going to spend money on tickets and tours. So they have great walking tours, like London walks are fantastic tours. They have London walks in Paris. So Paris walks, I guess, but you just pay like 10 euros and you show up at this one location and whoever shows up for the walk, that's great. And they give you a tour. So those are pretty cheap. My daughters did not like them because they were very popular with Americans, and Americans ruin everything in Europe because they're loud and rude and unpleasant. But you can also hire a private guide, which I totally recommend doing. We did that to get all the D-Day Normandy beaches. That can be anywhere from like $500 to $700, depending on what tour you're going to see. But a family of 5, it makes sense to just have the whole van to yourself. So the tour guide is for you. So if somebody wants to stop or there's something that we want to do, you have more freedom. Another time that I bought a private tour was to go see Hadrian's Wall, because we stayed in Newcastle and we're on our way to Edinburgh, but I wanted to see Hadrian's Wall because I'm the hugest history dork you've ever seen. And Vindalova was fantastic. This great Roman, the edge of the world is what Hadrian's Wall was. And that was worth a private tour. And they picked, this great retired history teacher picked my daughter and I up from our hotel. We did this fantastic tour and he dropped us right off. That was worth every penny. And we got to do exactly what we wanted to do, move at our own pace. It was wonderful. So the private tour is huge and you can arrange that in advance, even in all your tickets. Some of them are free because they're public galleries. Others are pretty minimal cost. But like Blenheim Palace is beautiful. That's where Winston Churchill was born. Absolutely fantastic. And actually, we just watched the Hamlet movie that was done, I think, in '98, and they used Blenheim Palace as the backdrop. And my daughter about choked. She said, "Oh my gosh, that's Blenheim Palace." She said, "I hit my head on that front door."
How cool.
It was so fantastic. So you have to plan ahead what tours you want, and everything is done online. So get real comfortable with that. The food issue, usually your hotel will have breakfast included. It just depends on who's going with us. If it's the whole family, I'll find a place that has breakfast included, because then those that want to eat can just run down and eat and we get on with it. But my daughter does not eat breakfast, so I did not pay an extra $10 a night or whatever the fee was. She and I just stopped and got a pastry and a coffee on our way out, and that's all that she needed. And then we stopped and had an earlier, bigger lunch. So lunch is usually 10 to 15 euros. Dinner is usually around 20 euros. But here's the way I plan for it. I plan about $40 a day per person, and my kids know that. So and you don't use $40 a day per person, but I give them the guidelines for their meals. And then we also stop by grocery store. Sainsbury is a great little British market, and they have just other little grocery store chains everywhere. So we pop into a grocery store, buy some kind of pre-made salads, pre-made whatevers, sandwiches. We eat a lot of sandwiches. We never eat sandwiches when we're here, because when we travel, that's all we eat, because it's quick. It's 5 to 8 euros, and you can eat your sandwich while you're walking to the next museum. So we don't do it fancy. We have lots of picnics. We'll go to the grocery store, grab some things, and then go to a park and just sit and eat. And that's what we do. They eat street food. You have to be real confident with eating crepes from a guy cooking in a street cart when you travel with us. But I'm not there to eat. I'm there to see the museums. I'm there to see all of these wonderful things. And those are some of my best memories. Sitting in gardens in Paris after we eat, watching the Parisians take their own lunch break as well. And just cooling off for just a second is just wonderful. And we have never gone through that. We put all of that money, the $40 a day, we put all of it in a checking account, and we have a travel account. So it's not linked to our personal account. But when we travel overseas, we found a credit card that doesn't have foreign exchange fees. So we take that credit card, but we also take that debit card to that checking account, and you just get off the plane, walk to the nearest ATM, and pull out whatever cash that you're going to need. When my daughter and I went, I think it was 22 when we went last year. When we were there, I just used my Apple Watch and Apple Pay, and it was linked to my no foreign transaction credit card. But it had to work to get rid of cash. Everything since COVID has been cashless. So making sure you know how Apple Pay works, or at least being comfortable with your tap credit card is fantastic. But that's really kind of the money parts, the nuts and bolts. I would ask grandparents to get in on this opportunity for them to see. This is, I don't like the trip of a lifetime, because I think travel is so much more affordable, and technology like translation apps, map apps. Rick Steves has a fantastic app that gives free audio guides, and we download it and do it in every city that is available. It's called Rick Steves Audio Europe, and they're free. So with all of these technologies and resources, it really is an amazing time to travel. So I don't want to say a lifetime trip. I really hope that more people will want to travel, and it gives them a different perspective. Like, going off to college isn't this big scary monster anymore, because they know how big the world is, or at least a part of the world. They know how big the Atlantic Ocean is, because it takes many hours to get across it. They know how big Europe is, because they walked a whole bunch of miles in it, and they've seen the different number of people and the different, all the different types of people. So it makes your world a little bit smaller. And then, we live in a small town, and there's some big fish in a small pond, but that's what they can recognize them as. Like, hey, that's great. But this is a pretty big world, and a lot of people don't really understand how big it is and what their place in it is.
Well, and I don't even know that it's so much. I mean, it's that for sure. But one of the things that I had advocated for a long time, especially after coming out of a position as a public school teacher in the late 90s, when we had already started political correctness, and we'd already started parents making excuses for their kids and all of that kind of stuff. And I basically was like, you know what we need to do? We need to figure out, instead of just paying all of these millions of dollars for public school, what we need to do is shorten that up, put the money in a fund, and then every senior who graduates, you just go drop them for 2 weeks in Sri Lanka. And you go, don't you want to come back to America now? What do you think about America now?
Yep.
Because I think
but even in Europe, we still have that. We're so excited to get home, like air conditioning, ice. Like,
yes.
We get we're so blessed. Yes, we're so blessed. And the facilities, like Northern Europe is pretty, like, there's some weird things that happen in bathrooms, like with the plumbing. But then you get to other parts and you're like, I don't really understand how this is supposed to work. And it's refreshing to be able to walk into any gas station and have a relative idea of, how to operate this equipment. But that's not the case in all of Europe.
Wow.
No. And we're so used to, things, and we're honestly, I mean, it's like you said, about Americans getting into Europe, and they're just they're gross, and they don't know how to behave, and I think the best thing that anybody that anybody can do is travel, because you see how the other half lives, essentially. And it just makes you so much more grateful for where you live, and being an American, just of having what we have, because everybody takes advantage of what we have right now and takes it for granted, and we still have more day-to-day access to things than the majority of the world. And people have got to understand this.
True, but the education part of all of that travel, like when your daughter saw a movie and was like, "Oh, I've been there, I bumped my head on," I love that. Like and so that I would think that would just give such a great level of confidence in your children to know that, hey, that's a real place. I've been there, and I can go back, and I can go there, and I'm not afraid of this, and I'm not afraid to try that.
It's actually awful right now, because I'm realizing how independent and how confident I have made my children, and like the sky's the limit. And and my daughter's thinking about going to college. Like the closest one she wants to go to is a good 12 hours away. And I just thought, why did I do this? Why didn't I just put you in a hole and not let you out ever? Like, what did I do? So I'm kind of rethinking all of that. I'm sure it'll work out fine.
Yes, my confident daughter that lives in Scotland now is like, excuse me, did I do that on purpose? No.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you said too, Emily, that I want to really, another thing that I really want to bounce off of what you said, because I know that people say, well, I can't afford to do that. I mean, I can't afford to do that. They'll say they can't afford to homeschool. But it's all about where you
priorities.
Yeah, it's all about priorities. Exactly, Julie. And if you want to put money aside every month into an account for travel, that's kind of what we have. We have an account where you put extra money, or money that you've saved up, and you put it in an account for travel. And it's not as undoable. But I was going to ask you, did not with Brexit, didn't England get off the euro? Aren't they back on the pound?
Yeah. I don't think they ever got on the euro. They definitely are on, they definitely have pounds. I don't think that they ever went on the euro, actually. They financially never joined, but all through the rest of Europe, it's just the euro.
Yeah. Yeah, and it still is, isn't it?
Yeah. We don't eat out a lot. Like when I say, like, when we go eat pizza, when we have pizza, like that's kind of a big deal. We cook most of our own meals. There's a lot that we don't do that other people do. Like my daughter was talking to her friend last night. I caught a conversation. She asked what she gets at Starbucks. And then she said, "Oh, that's kind of an expensive drink, isn't it?" And she said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, like with the add-ons." And I said, "Oh, Grace has to pay for her own Starbucks because I'm not buying Starbucks, actually. So if you want that, you'll have to pay for it. But my money is not going to that." So we make decisions for many, many years that are different than other people, but everyone gets to spend their money the way they want to.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so, where
and that all by itself is an education right there. You making those decisions and teaching your kids, you do this, you don't get to do that. Or if you choose to put your money here and have an account for this and don't touch it, that's an education in itself.
Yeah. And we don't go to Disney. My kids have never been to Disney, and these people spend thousands of dollars to go to Disney, and I don't understand it. We've only gone if they have military appreciation days, like at theme parks, but we don't do that. And I look at that, I think you're spending $5,000 to go to Florida. Do you know where you give me $5,000? My kids and I are going someplace, and it is not going to be Florida, which I love the beach, don't get me wrong. But the same people who say they can't afford to go to Europe are the same people who will spend tons of money at Disney or whatever other American holiday or an all-inclusive beach. Like, you could not get me to go to an all-inclusive resort. Like, I could not lay on a chaise lounge with an umbrella drink and be happy for a week. Like, that sounds miserable to me.
Yeah.
What do you learn? Nothing. How to drink gluttonously, like like you were saying, they don't do in Europe.
Well, how you get a tan?
Yeah.
You learn how to get a tan. That's a lot of vitamin D. Keeps you from getting COVID.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
or you can work in the garden and get a tan
And
too.
like lawn mowing does the same thing, I feel like.
For sure. So I did want to ask you, because we're closing in on 55. We hadn't scheduled to talk about this, but I'm hoping you want to talk about it. So you mentioned that you were into politics, and the way that you and I ended up meeting was kind of through a political means, because you've been very active in politics in your little town. And one of the things that I do want to ask you about is, because I believe, check me if I'm wrong, but you turned over 4 of 5 city council seats?
So we have worked and improved our city commission like no other. So immediately after COVID, we had 3 seats that we flipped, and then we've continued just to make more inroads, asking people to run. There's not a big, we're not running against COVID anymore, but finding conservative people to run for office is really what my goal is. Actually, conservative men to run for office is a goal in our community. So finding these men to serve on boards throughout the city is important. And a lot of it is just communication, but and getting information to people, because for a long time conservatives were checked out, and they were busy running their businesses, running their families. And I don't put any pressure on young moms, because I tell you what, that survival is like just getting these children fed and clean maybe for that day is a huge effort. But now that my children are a little bit older and I have a little bit more time, it's definitely an area that I think conservatives need to look at. And I think I see a lot of growth in other areas. For what we've done to help people win elections is one thing, but I have seen scores of people become more active in politics just because they jumped in and figured it out just like we did. And so there's lots more attention being paid to all the types of government, from our county, city, school districts. All of those have gotten the attention of conservatives, and I see more people interested in watching than I ever have than I ever have.
Well, and you also had a library. You've been kind of fighting the library system as well. Do you want to say a couple of bits about that?
Yeah, the library hadn't had policy rewritten in quite some time. This is huge that a conservative library board was able, and just the fact that they were conservative really isn't it is indifferent. They just wrote some really great policy. We had some egregious things happening at our public library that were being tolerated by municipal bureaucrats. Unelected bureaucrats is what I call them. And it was appalling. So there were measures taken place, put in policy where you are tied to it. So harmful to children is a huge thing. They were having online teen homosexual groups without parents' permission. There were other secret chat groups going on that were not approved. Like they would use a personal account, but use it for official official activities that weren't advertised. There was a lot of deception going on. So I can't say that it's gotten better. Our city commission just voted one of these library board members off. She was instrumental in reading this absolute filth because she uses the library with her grandchildren, and she would read these pornographic books. And unfortunately, our city commission booted her in favor of a political appointee. So, I mean, you can't ever win. There's no win. There's just pushback. So I see more people pushing back in all areas. So I think that is a win, even though our city commission was incredibly disappointing in backtracking and not supporting somebody who wanted to get porn out of the library. And frankly, I can't think of any other institution that would allow their employees to have contact with children and discuss sexuality with them. I can't think of any other city department that would be allowed in.
Public schools
Public
and
schools.
public government run
Yes.
entities. That's where you get
Well,
it.
and I think didn't we do some open record requests on your behalf for that library also, Emily?
Yeah, you taught us so much about open records requests, and I think that's really important. I think the unelected bureaucrats do not like to comply with oversight.
Yeah.
They don't give you much information, and they get very annoyed that they actually have to comply. But I think it also is a pretty good shot across the bow to remind unelected bureaucrats that they actually are employed by the people, and that the authority of government is with the people, not with unelected bureaucrats. So I think that is always important. So I know how to fill out an open records request now with the best of them, and I get all sorts of information. And that's wonderful. We had, and just by doing that and knowing how the process works, and I'm so grateful to y'all for teaching me, because I didn't know anything. Y'all are pioneers in this, and it's so gracious to teach people how to get active in government. But it was great, and it revealed a huge issue that was coming down the pike. And because I got an open records request and got information that was absolutely ridiculous, we were able to stop some pretty ridiculous things from happening, because I think I asked some questions and they had to turn over some material that was ridiculous, that they were wanting to go forward with.
That's the best
And was
part
this
right there.
no kidding? Was that the library or the city council?
It was the city council, and also a different organization. I don't want to say which one it was, but it was a department within the city that has very little oversight. It's under a new leadership at the moment, but it made everybody nervous, and nobody would return my call. And so the assistant city manager called to answer all of my questions. So I think that's pretty telling, that they don't want me talking to everybody, just certain people. But it was good. It was good information, and I'm glad that I got it. And they complied, and they gave me the information I needed. And it's probably good that I love history, and can dig through hundreds of pages of stuff, because it was gold.
Yeah.
Well, I think just you. I mean, you guys invited me to come talk about dark money at one of your groups, and I was shocked, frankly, to see how many people are involved in your area. I mean, it was shocking. I mean, there aren't towns that have quite so much going on as yours does. And I think you've seen some good positive things happen because of your involvement, right? I mean,
absolutely. And I think following the money is a great idea. And if you don't know who your elected officials have used for campaign donations, if you don't know the connections, that's a great place to start. You want to practice open records, that's a great place to start. You'll start to see real quick who has whose ear, and who the influential players are. But we do have a lot of people, and I think there's I think just for so long people had been busy, but I think that the other side has just gone too far. Sexualizing children is something no American is comfortable with. Like, that is abhorrent to a majority of Americans, and I think we're seeing the pushback finally. And I'm glad. And if it takes a few homeschool moms to start it, that's wonderful. But it is hard to unhook yourself from that system. And I know that parents do struggle, and they don't want to speak out, say, at the school, because they don't want their child to have negative consequences. But you got to do something.
And why churches aren't standing up and why pastors aren't leading the way is just mind-boggling to me, because
I think because they've adopted the same trust the experts mantra that the world has been selling.
Right. They've been raised in the same schools that, government
have been dishing out the communist propaganda.
Exactly what they wanted to teach them. And I know, but if you're reading the Bible, you should know that it's your job to rescue children.
Mhm.
So gonna
Yeah.
have to push it back on Christians in general, not just a pastor, because pastor is just one of the many uh, gifts that the Lord gives us. But Christians in general should be rescuing children, and if a church has a building, they should be offering it up, and they don't often.
Right.
So,
And I think that is another benefit of homeschool, though, because we're connected as women to so many other women, older, younger. It really is an amazing community. And we
right,
really are the most well-connected people in any town. And I think the thing that breaks my heart is so many people are so unconnected and they don't
right,
have
Yes.
community. So I'm
right.
purposeful, even in churches, to look for people and ways to build community. I won't say that I'm always the most popular because I do believe in the inerrant word of God, and I do apply it to my life. And I believe in the doctrine of the Christian church. So there's limits to what is going to get my approval, but that's okay.
Raising the standard is never bad.
Never a
Right.
bad thing.
And having standards is not a bad thing.
Exactly.
No, not at all.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Well, Emily, anything else before we sign off for today?
I don't think so. I just appreciate this opportunity. And I'm not oblivious to the economy. It's a terrible time right now, and I'm not asking you put this pressure. I think our electricity bill has doubled, if not tripled. Our
Oh my
grocery
gosh.
bill is out of control. Like, and my husband and I had a meeting a couple months ago about finances because he pays one part of it, but then I'm making the decisions in the grocery store, and we just hadn't talked in a while, and everything just costs more. So I don't want you to be discouraged. Like, the economy is terrible right now, and everyone is feeling the pinch of this inflation. But why the economy is terrible, I think that would be a great time to start planning. And if you can save now, that's great. But if you can't, then start watching some Rick Steves audio Europe's or go to your library and get a guidebook, or buy a guidebook and start thumbing through it. It is amazing information. Start planning your trip now. I know it's a garbage economy, but just wait and things will get better eventually, and then you'll be prepared. So I don't want you to think that I am indifferent to groceries. Like, I remember, like, you can't fill up a bag at Walmart for $100 now. It is heartbreaking.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't
But
be
you're
discouraged, but you can still plan.
yeah, so planning, but then the other thing, like you said, there are so many good there is an internet and a broadband system full of a bazillion channels worth of things, and lots of them are travel channels and places where you can go get, and so you can walk through that with your kids in your own living room if you just don't feel like there's any way that's going to happen. But to neglect study of the world, which is again another one of the communist things, we have to get that out of the classroom. We can't know what everybody else is doing, because then that would let you know that there are other people in the world and they do different things. So definitely do follow up on what Emily is saying, and take the time to find some travel shows, and connect them to poets and writers and things, and connect those things, because that does tend to bring things alive for kids. And the one way they remember things is if it means something to them. If they connect with it somehow, they remember that thing. So Emily, thank you so much for being with us today. Yeah,
thank you
it was
so much
just
for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
so encouraging to hear what you have to say to parents, because that's so many times parents believe the line that they can't educate their own kids, or they can't do this, or they can't do that, and that somehow they're just a willing participant in their child's lives. They're not a director. So thank you so much for making us aware that we need to be in the director's seat, and this is one really fun, great way of doing that. So thanks so very much, and have a wonderful Independence Day.
Thank you. You too.
Not the 4th of July, but Independence Day.
Independence Day.
Independence.
Yes. I hope you read your Declaration of Independence.
I read it this morning.
And in the course
That's
of human
wonderful.
events. Yeah. Thanks again, Emily. We will talk to you
Good
soon.
stuff.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Bye-bye. So I just looked because I always don't look. And so I looked, and guess what? Next Wednesday we'll be back, and we'll be, I think, no, yes, I think I will. No, I will be in the car. So it will be you and Michael and Julia will be next Wednesday, because I will be back in the car and won't have a place to get on. But you guys are going to be talking to Representative Sherry Connolly
Oh, good.
on Wednesday. That's
She's-
going to be your guest for
she's good.
Wednesday.
Excellent.
So make
Sounds
sure, and make sure you're watching and you have questions for her. I know people forget that you can make comments. Look over on the side, look down below. You can make those comments. Oh, and Michael, you and I have something new to say for today. We will have something new to announce.
Yeah. You
We
wanna-
will.
Well, we're going to have a Patreon for a more interactive portion. People can join Patreon, and they can have a more interactive portion with us, with a couple guests that we're going to have on once a month. And we'll take emails or comments or whatever specifically that people want to ask or talk about, and we're going to address all those things specifically and have some more concentrated content specifically for Patreon members.
So people have asked us before, how do you become a member of Rope? Well, we never really had a membership until Michael set us up. And so now we will have a Patreon account. You can become a member. We'll have information about that going out in the newsletter very, very soon. So watch for that. And you can become a Rope member very soon on our Patreon account. So, hey.
Excellent. Yay.
All right. Love you guys.
We'll see you Wednesday.
Yeah. Well, no, you won't see me Wednesday.
Oh, you won't see you Wednesday.
I'll hook everything. I'll create it all, and then I'll be in the car. So,
Well, and I want to make just one more point. I think it's important with everything that from Emily's experience that I just want to reiterate, because I do have kids in public school and homeschool, but just being able to travel and get out of the echo chamber, that is just the normal everyday life of public school, and everything's so regimented. And in my opinion, I tell my kids this all the time, and they'll probably use this against me in my next campaign of some sort, but public school literally just creates automatons. It just takes the entire excitement of being a kid and the learning process, and but for me, like that travel and doing those things, that's expanding their consciousness. That's going to entire experiences from all five senses, and you're in a whole new place, and you're having to push your own personal boundaries to get out of your comfort zone. That's so important that it's just completely disregarded. And I think if there was a place that every kid in the United States could go travel like that, if there was some fund, or we took a portion of our education money and allowed these kids to expand their consciousness, I think it'd just be absolutely fantastic. So I'm so glad we did have Emily on, because I think that people forget, people are so consumed in their phones and all their social media and all their, the distraction of life. Yeah. They forget that, you want to expand yourself and experience, as much as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, everybody, so enjoyed being with you again today, and I will see you guys next Friday, but everybody else will see you on Wednesday with Sherry Connolly.
Sounds great.
Yeah, sounds
All right.
good.
So we'll talk to you soon. And thank you guys. And again, happy Independence Day, not July 4th. Let's read the Declaration of Independence Day on the 4th. So take care. Talk to you soon.